Yesterday, we received the final episode of Hawkeye, officially wrapping up the 6 episode series on Disney Plus. And I've got to say, for the most part, I've got mixed reactions about this one. I can say right from the beginning that this is definitely my least favorite of the live action Marvel series. But it's not entirely bad. It's not like a bad show. It's just got a lot of things that I really enjoyed and a lot of things that I didn't really like at all. And so today we're going to look at both of those things and see what it is that's good about this series, what's bad about this series. And let's go ahead and start off with the good. So when it comes to the good, the best thing about this series to me by far was the characters, both the returning characters, the new characters, and some surprise characters that you weren't expecting to see. And overall, they were definitely the standout. I thought that Clint was my personal favorite. He's always been an interesting character in the MCU. He's never really been able to shine as kind of the leading star, though, and this one gives him that opportunity finally. And I thought it was really interesting, the arc that they gave him, how he's kind of dealing with the aftermath of Endgame, of losing Natasha, and basically just the aftermath of everything that has occurred during his time as an Avenger, because he has hearing aids now, he can't hear very well. And it just was kind of an interesting story arc because he is a character that doesn't actually have any superpowers, and so he's going to have different effects on him than someone like Steve Rogers or Thor, who have these special abilities. And so I really liked what they did with him. I thought that it was interesting and that he was a very understandable character in this. The other character, big character of the series, was Kate Bishop, the new Hawkeye that they introduced, and she was fun. I really enjoyed her. I thought she brought a nice energy to the series, especially going up against Clint's not so charismatic side, but she was also just interesting in her own story as well, and how her family is into all this bad stuff and she's trying to be a good guy. I really liked how much she liked Hawkeye and how she had kind of idolized him since a young age after he saved her life, and how she kind of sees him as a different kind of hero than the other Avengers, and that, anyone can be a hero, and that Clint is the perfect example of that. And so I really liked her storyline. We saw Yelena come back in this series. Obviously, she's Natasha's sister. We met her in the Black Widow movie, and she had a really interesting story as well. The reason for why she's there follows directly from the end of Black Panther, or end of Black Widow, sorry, and why she's going after Clint Barton. So I really enjoyed her. She was a lot of fun in this series. It was fun to watch her in the action and just get a little bit more into her character. A couple other characters in there. You've got Jack, who is Kate's mom's fiance, and I believe he's technically the comic book character, the swordsman, and I didn't really love him at first, but as the series went on, it kind of started to grow on me. He's kind of interesting, he's kind of fun. I don't know where he's going to go next in the MCU, if we're going to see him again at all, but for this series, I thought he was a nice little part in it. Then there's one character that I'm not going to go into extreme detail on, but they appear, you get a tease of him in the 5th episode, and they're in the 6th episode. It's a character that we've seen before. They were returning for this series. I'm not going to say who it is just to avoid spoilers in case you haven't yet watched the series, but it was fun to see him back and to see him being as good as he's ever been, and I'm excited to see, hopefully, that there'll be more of him in the MCU, but that ending kind of leaves that up for debate. Other things that I really enjoyed about this series is with the introduction of this new character, they set up a lot of potential for future series, for future movies potentially, and a lot of conflict that could be occurring in the New York criminal undermind. And I really look forward to that, and I think that that was a great thing about the series, is it does a great job of setting up for what could potentially follow after, and I'm excited to see what they're going to do with it. Something that I want to talk about that was kind of a negative and a positive was the storylines of the series. There's a couple different storylines, and some of them I really liked, some of them I didn't like so much. But for me, the favorite aspect of the series was what starts originally in episode 3, and it's the kind of conflict and storyline between Yelena and Clint. And it reaches a nice resolution in the final episode, and I just thought it was a lot more emotional, a lot more meaningful, and it just felt more like a great storyline than some of the other ones in this. I really found myself enjoying how those two characters interacted with each other and what was going on between them, and it just kind of made sense. It felt like something that was going to happen following the events of Endgame, following what we saw in Black Widow, And so it was a nice kind of wrap up to some things that was set up in those series. And when we get to the bad, I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other storylines that didn't really stick out to me all that well. But the last thing I want to talk to you regarding the good of this series is something that's actually both good and bad. And that's the action and the humor that the series presents. And when it comes to the action, it's enjoyable. I always found myself enjoying the action scenes that they had, and I thought that they had a lot of fun trick arrows, and it was fun to see him doing the things that we usually see Hawkeye do, and even doing more of it, and introducing Kate Bishop to it. So it was always enjoyable to watch the action. Same thing with the humor as well, as the humor was, for the most part, pretty funny. I found myself laughing a lot and enjoying how the characters interact with each other and kind of the jokes that were played off of that. But there's some things about those things, stuff that I didn't like as well, and let's go ahead and jump right into that. So when it comes to the bad in this series, there were a lot of things that I just didn't really like about it. As we mentioned in the good, the action was enjoyable to watch, but there were a lot of times in the series where I felt that it felt kind of cartoon-like. There's a fight specifically towards the beginning of the series in which Kate fights some people in the Widen cellar, she fights the tracksuits, and it just kind of felt like a cartoon. It just didn't feel very realistic in the fighting style and how things were going on. I felt like she could have easily been beaten being so young, and these are supposed to be some great mafia guys, but she just always seems to kick the crap out of them. And so I liked the action because it was enjoyable for the most part to watch it, but I just didn't find myself really loving it, and so it's kind of a mixed reaction to that. Same thing goes for the humor. Again, it was pretty funny. I found myself laughing and enjoying it, but there were a lot of times where it was thrown into parts of the series that should have been a lot more serious, especially with the tracksuits. They throw a lot of humor in with them that kind of should be at parts when maybe they should be a little bit more worried about these guys because they're like tied up and they're going to try and kill them, but they're just joking around and they're throwing jokes at each other, and it just kind of took away from what I feel like the series should have drawn for, is a little bit more of a serious approach to some of those things. But it was funny. So again, humor's kind of mixed for me. The other thing that really was kind of mixed for me, as I mentioned in the good, is the storylines that this series tells, and unfortunately, I didn't enjoy the main story. The main story kind of involves Clint's time as the Ronin and how that's kind of come back up and how it's causing issues for him and for everyone involved. And that part, I guess, was somewhat interesting, the idea of how Ronin affected things for this series, but the actual way it was brought in, I just didn't really enjoy it. The tracksuits were kind of the main villains for the most part, and they didn't really feel like villains. They didn't really feel intimidating in a way. It felt like every time that they did fight the tracksuits, they always won. They always kicked the crap out of them. You never really felt like they were really a threat to Kate or Clint. And I didn't really like that, especially since I didn't make them so humorous. It just didn't really deliver in a way that I had wanted the villains to. And that was a downside for me. The other thing with the main storyline is it takes quite a while to get going. It's not until like episode 3 that you finally see Clint and Barton use a bow for the first time. And so it's just really a slow build up. And things start to get better once you get around to like episode 4 through 6. They start to pick up a little bit, but there's still just not a lot of action, and it's more spread out, and it never felt like this was as big or as serious of an issue as what we got in some of the other Disney Plus series. So I wasn't particularly a fan of that. And that's really going to wrap it up for me as far as the things that I didn't love so much from the series. Overall, Hawkeye was kind of a mixed bag. It had a lot of good things to it, a lot of bad things. You know, there were some storylines that were really enjoyable. There were some storylines that I really found myself buying into all that much. The action was both enjoyable but cartoon-like. The humor was funny but in the wrong places. And so it was just kind of little parts that here you'd really enjoy something and here you wouldn't enjoy it as much. And really the thing that kind of elevates this and keeps this as really a fresh series and one that I would rewatch and enjoy quite a bit is the characters. That was the standout of it. They really was interesting what they did with their storylines, how they had them interacting together. The new characters that they brought in were always fun, always entertaining to watch, and you find yourself really liking them. And it does a good job of setting up for the future of the MCU and some of the things that maybe we'll see other characters come in and deal with, and that will be very fun as we get to those series or movies or whatever it might be. But because it is such a mixed bag, I want to say that it is fresh. It's definitely something that I would recommend checking out if you have the time. But for it as a series, I'm going to give it a B minus. It was enjoyable, but not great. And so that's kind of what my thoughts are on this film. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of the series. And of course, let me know any other series or movies that you may like me to review coming in the near future. And I look forward to doing another video with you guys, and we'll see you next time.